Hiya, welcome to the Pigeon World podcast. Today we've got Ian Evans on, the former CEO of the Racing Pigeon Association, Royal Racing Pigeon Association, and welcome, Ian.
Hi Mark, thanks for inviting me on and good to see you again.
Yeah, you too. So some people may have seen the interview that you did last week, and if you have, you might be thinking, well, why have I asked Ian to come on again? Let me say I don't know Dan personally that did the interview, but I've got a lot of time for what he's trying to do. I'm follow his channel. I like his style, I like his questions, and I just generally like all of the videos he does. So in no way is this I'd love to be able to help Dan and whatever in any way I can. Um, so this is, some would say this could be some of the same questions, but at the same time, I've got a different reach and different people view my channels and all that stuff to Dan. So that's why we're doing it. So
Yeah.
give the overview briefly of what you've done to people that don't know already what you've done, Ian, please.
Okay, yeah. So I think we need to take a step back to what prompted all this really. I mean, as you alluded, I previously worked for the RPRA, chief executive for some 6 years. And during that time, well, right at the start of my tenure, really, the whole report was commissioned by the RPRA Council. And the content of that whole report was part of the reason I took the decision to take the job when I was offered it, because I've always been quite critical of the structure of the RPRA and feel they can do they can do a lot more even before I worked for the RPRA. And I was really critical during the really doing recognise and acknowledge. But in my opinion, it could be doing all the previous 6 years with social enterprises. I would put the RPRA in that category. So it's not a profitable, it's not run for profit for personal gain. It's an enterprise which exists for where the social aims and objectives at the core of its being really. I could see the content of the all report made total sense. It's what I'd learned in the previous 6 years, really, in terms of what is a successful organization. So, spent some time rewriting the rules to implement the all report. Basically, um, that was thrown out. The only recommendation in the entire all report that was implemented was to change the description, job title of the general manager, the role I was in, to chief executive, which in essence made no difference at all because it didn't place any additional kind of authority or decision-making powers in the role. It was just a change of job description. Um, and the council, through the regions, really threw out the content of the all report, which meant we remained with the kind of regional structure. So anyway, there was a couple of opportunities, there was a couple of situations after that time where I tried to change things, especially moving to a one member, one vote basis, which was blocked again. Uh, and also even from a budgeting point of view, which was blocked. So when they are that if they didn't, within 18 months, they'd be in a dire financial position where it would probably mean they would be bankrupt. And that's something, okay, the timescales weren't perhaps what I predicted previously, but I predicted that kind of situation unless something was done, which fell on deaf ears, really. Or maybe it didn't fall on deaf ears. They realized it was right, but the kind of way I was proposing to change it didn't really fit in with their agenda, which is disappointing. So when that levy
What
came
do you
out, and there
think
was a
that
lot of
agenda
uproar
was,
about it from
though?
members, and rightly so, because of the way it was done. Well, the agenda was to keep the status quo, to keep the regions, keep the council structure, and thereby keep people, the same people, in power in terms of who ultimately makes the decisions around the association. Because it isn't the CEO, it wasn't Ian Evans, and it wouldn't be Chris Sutton now who's making those decisions. It's not even the council most sometimes. It's the kind of structure below that, the regions, which mandate the councillors, regional reps. And in theory, what should be happening is that members go to region meetings and vote on proposals or put forward ideas or suggestions, and then that's voted on by the 13 regions. But what you find is a very limited amount of people go to those regions for different reasons, probably less than 2% of the membership. And so you have a small group of people within each region, and regions do differ. This is not the case with all regions. For the majority of regions, you have a small group of people making the decisions on the direction of the association, including its finances and everything else. And if those changes were implemented, that power base among those small group of people would have been removed. So, and we were relying on those small group of people to vote through the change. So the turkey voting for Christmas comment comes to mind, really.
Yeah. I mean, to me, the whole report, when reading it, seemed make complete sense. And my personal opinion is, which I've expressed before, that the entire structure, the idea that it's governed from the ground up, doesn't work. As simple as that. It's evident it doesn't work. To me, it's too hard. As of right now, I'm a member of a club, but I don't fly in the club. Been a member of it for 4 years. Next year, I won't be a member of the club. We'll come on to the individual membership side in a little while. But at the same time, the process of going to the club, putting a proposal in, getting people to agree on it, big hurdle one, then going to the region,
Mm.
massive hurdle,
Mm.
then going to council, then getting the right outcome. Four big barriers, really.
Yeah.
Doesn't work.
Yeah.
And the whole report, one member, one vote, change the organizational structure. Any modern business, whether it's for profit or not, it still has to be run as a business, shouldn't be working like that at all.
No.
So the document you've put out is specifically for the purposes of members clubs being able to submit this document. It's a long document, 45 pages, but I want to emphasize that for people to get their heads around it, they really only need to read the first page.
Yeah, the first page is an overview of what comes in the next 44 pages, basically. The next 44 pages are just ridiculous speak, which is required, which is what the kind of structure the RPRA require propositions to be made in, where you're basically saying delete Rule 38, and then you're writing out the actual what the rule says, then replace with the revised rule. And basically, the 44 pages are all rule changes, but that front page just summarizes what the content of the other 44 pages are trying to achieve, which is basically some of the whole report, but going one stage further. So it's implementing the whole report means there's recommended an executive committee for these rule changes and proposals. Implement an executive committee of 5 people rather than a council of what is it, currently 18 people, I think. One member, one vote. So each and every individual has the opportunity to vote on the direction of the association, and they're not required to attend meetings of any kind to be able to do that. Propositions will be put forward and they can vote. But it goes one step further in terms of removing the regional structure, which the all report didn't really kind of, well, it wasn't a recommendation in there. But I mean, I see the regional structure as the issue. Having my understanding of everything, every change that I see, not just proposals made by Ian Evans, but other proposals which came from everybody else, I see the regional structure as the problem because that's where things get blocked. That's where change gets blocked. And at the same time, it's these people making the decisions. If we take finances for a start, it's these people making the decisions about finances. But at the same time, these people are the ones blaming other people for the position that the RPRA is in. When really speaking, it's them. And, I think some of the representatives from these regions, are quite outspoken about it. I think they have a kind of shop steward mentality where they're turning up to these meetings to take on what they see as the management of the RPRA, i.e. the chief executive. When in actual fact, it's them making the decisions. It's a crazy situation, really, Mark. And, so I think for the sport and the RPRA to progress, I think this regional structure, which is time after time after time block change, needs to be removed. And we need a far more simplified, streamlined approach to making decisions where every member has the opportunity to engage.
So to clarify, the one member, one vote would be able to be done online, which is relatively easy to implement now. And for people that struggle online, maybe there are obviously some people that of an older generation. It would also be paper post
Yeah.
voting as well.
Yeah, I think we need to make it as simple as possible for every member of the RPRA, and at the same time make it from a standpoint where it doesn't cost a lot of money, doesn't cost the association a lot of money, because
Mm.
that's part of the reason for the recommendations is to cut the overheads in terms of the governance structure, which I estimate is around 90, £100,000 a year. So it's about drastically reducing those costs, and at the same time giving each individual the opportunity to engage and have their say on an individual basis. So online voting, yes, you've got a bit of background a better background in IT than me, but that could be implemented quite easily and quite cheaply. And for those who haven't got access to the internet or perhaps not competent in using it, any online process, then there's nothing wrong with providing a paper-based ballot for them to be able to engage. But you know, I've said many times I don't accept that people, there's not that many people who don't use the internet nowadays. Even people, even pigeon fanciers of the age of 65, 75, 80 even, there's very few of them
Hmm.
use the internet. And those who don't, there's always people available to help them use the
Yeah.
internet.
I mean, the reality is people from a cost point of view of RPRA side of things, a PDF, downloadable PDF that can be printed. If people are genuinely not online, a club member can go and print the PDF, give it to them, and they can post it at their own expense as their ballot done. So, in essence, the only cost of the RPRA is processing them when they come in. There's zero cost of it. Once the system's set up, which is relatively easy to do, it's done. With you mentioned the cost with regards to the region. So you're estimating that it's 90 to 100 grand a year the regions are costing. And that equates to, well, I was just going to try and work out off the top of my head what that equates to per member per year, but there's no accurate membership numbers knocking around at the minute. Do we
The,
know why that is?
the RPRA, i.e. the CEO, will know the exact numbers. They can get those numbers at a press of a button from the database. Um, I viewed 13,000 members banded about, which I've got no reason to disbelieve, but that's a hell of a drop because I think when I left 2 years ago, there was 18,000 members, maybe 17,500 members. And
Mm.
that's a hell of a drop to 13,000 members in 2 years when you think that the reduction in terms of percentage basis in the years I was there initially was around 5%. And the time I left, it reduced to something around just the 3% mark. And that 5,000 drop in members or 4,500 drop in members is a
Yeah,
lot
I
more than
mean, I've
3%.
heard 13, like you put in your introduction, 13, 15. So let's say you went with 15 as an example. There's a couple of points there on this issue. One, so let's work with 15 at 90,000 pounds a year for the regions to be ran. You're essentially looking at £6 per member it's costing.
Mm, mm,
Do
yeah.
we know why the numbers are not available? Surely, as a organization that is ran by its members, and surely all members should have. I asked previously last year and gave up directly in an email. Can you tell me the current numbers of the RPRA and the circulation of the British Homing World
Yeah.
when I was trying to put something together to figure out what was going on, and I was asked why I wanted it, and I said, well, I want to do a piece about it, and then I didn't get any response. I mean,
It shouldn't matter where you want it, should it? Yeah, I mean, the data should be readily available. All right, I think from the time I'm there, you'll probably be able to find online the membership numbers each year because it should be about transparency, shouldn't it? At the end of the day, it shouldn't. The more you withhold data like this, the more questions people ask. Well, why are you withholding this data? I'm sure there's no sinister reason for it, but it just doesn't make sense to me.
no, no, and it's the same as like the circulation of the British Homing World. I had a particular argument. I'm not even asking you to comment on it. I'm just making a statement that um, if the British homing world changed their approach to be able to get the readership up, it would promote more advertising. And to me, the amount of people that get their hard copy of the British Homing World and then share it with their mates. Don't know what their numbers are, but I would imagine that happens a lot.
Yeah.
And I did the same for the online version, and I was that subsequently stopped and indirectly was told I should hang my head in shame for doing so. But that's a very short-sighted way of looking at it, in my opinion. If this is outside of what we're specifically talking about, but it's another idea that, again, way of thinking. I don't know what the numbers are with regards to what people pay every month or week for their hard copy. I would imagine it covers the costs, or I would hope it covers the cost of doing so. And if the online version was incorporated into people's membership, this was an idea I had, which is why I was trying to get the numbers. You could get the online version of British Home World into people's membership. That would massively boost readership numbers for advertisers to warrant going in the homing world and advertising more. And then you charge the hard copy to cover the costs of producing the hard copy. That's why I was asking for the numbers. But again, it just seems a bit like, well, why are these numbers not available? But moving on, not even asking you for a comment on that. It was just a
Oh,
personal.
but I'm happy to comment. I mean, those numbers are obviously available, aren't they? Okay, I can understand they might be a bit commercially sensitive. Maybe that's an argument. I don't know. I know it's an argument that was laid at my feet previously. But in terms of the British Roman world and like the kind of the way it needed to change quite a few years ago, really, didn't it? I mean, it's just been going along in the same old way. And I think initially, when I started to make changes there, I was told by certain people it's making a profit, leave it alone. Which, okay, it's making a profit, but you could see the direction he was going in. And I mean, the British Roman world has been the jewel and the crown of the RPRA, really, isn't it? For a long time, in terms of it's made a hell of a lot of money, and it's basically subsidised the running of the RPRA. But anybody could see, the way the direction was going on the
It's not the
statistics in
jewel
terms of.
anymore, and if it was making
It's
money,
not. It's a liability. It became a liability, didn't it? Which is
well, if it's
again,
amazing making while it was making money, if it could be made more money, make more money every month,
well, exactly. And
why
and
wouldn't
if
you do that?
if it was your business or my business, you'd be looking to maximize profits, and that's exactly what should have happened. We should be looking to maximize profits. I mean, my idea was we needed to make the RPRA wipe its own feet, at least break even, and nothing more. And the British Open World and the RPRA one-off race should be driven by making profit. That should be at the core. The very existence of having them should be okay. It's a service to the members. It should also be driven by profit. But rather than reinvesting those profits, and the British Open was making large profits, into plugging the gap at the RPRA, the RPRA should be wiping its own feet. And those profits from the British Open world should be reinvested back into the sport, either trying to promote the sport or things like trying to improve the transportation position. There's no reason why those profits couldn't have been put into a pot, and you could have set up a subsidiary transport company which is owned by the membership and run for the membership. So, state of the art transportation, because let's be honest, some of the transport that's come around the country is absolutely shambles and it's a disgrace, some of them. And that transport company could supply transport for different parts of the UK to transport their pigeons. So that was just one idea, obviously, and I mean, the RPRA one-off race was very successful. It hasn't been successful this year, and we can go into the reasons for that, but there's not. Those profits were, I think, generally before I got there, they were just again put into the accounts of the RPRA, okay, there was a separate fund. They did have a separate account for what was the Future of the Sport Committee. So the profits from the one-off race were going into the Future of the Sport Committee accounts, which were absorbed into the overall RPRA accounts. And they did fund projects which were, you could argue, promoting the sport in some kind of way, but they were very small scale, very low value projects. And I think, one thing I was kind of one thing I wanted to do was take that to another level where we promote the sport rather than sitting back and saying, right, the sport's dying, nobody's coming. Let's not accept that. Let's at least try to do something. So for a few years, we had the development officers project, and the budget was £60,000 a year, which is nothing. And that was coming from the profits of the one-off race. And okay, it wasn't going to change the kind of numbers that were taken part in the sport overnight, but it was at least a start. But again, that coming the criticism from the very people who, in my opinion, had a duty to try and ensure that this sport continues long into the future. The very people on the RPRA councils in the regions. But what they did, they attacked the project at every opportunity. Okay, wasn't perfect, but it could be made bigger and better all the time. And the reason they did that is not because, really speaking, they don't want to see a future of the sport. It's because they could see that money, that £60,000, very small amount of money for an organisation the size of the RPRA to put in promotion, was being used for something other than maintaining the status quo in their position. Because the way they saw it was, the RPRA was losing money. Well, get rid of that £60, that £60,000 budget there, and put that into the overall running of the RPRA, which was a very short-sighted way of doing it, really.
Well, yeah, and that's one of the inherent problems of it, short-term thinking of it. Practically, the uproar about membership fees kicked off a lot of this thinking again. Hopefully, it's the catalyst for people to stand up and take action. Personal opinion is, if you had to pay £50 a year for an RPRA membership and things were being done and it was being used correctly, it's £1 a week, less than £1 a week. Very few clubs or associations you can get for that kind of money. But I think, and I agree that people say, well, I don't mind paying if it's being used right. Ultimately, that's though only plugging a gap. And who knows where that will be at in a year's time. Hopefully it'll be better. But practically, with this document, which I'm going to put the link to in all of the links to the videos on all the socials, what do people, in short, need to do?
Yeah, before I come on to that, let's come back to the point you made about paying £50 or whatever it is. I think you're right. A large proportion of people wouldn't care if it was £50. It's currently £35, but the argument is, a significant amount of that money is going into propping up a governance structure which isn't fit for purpose. It's a total waste of money. And it's something which doesn't represent the majority feelings of the members. That's obvious. It doesn't. So why would you keep propping that up when there's far more financial efficient ways of doing it? And that's at the core of this, really. So I don't mind paying £35 a year to be a member of the RPRA, as long as I thought that £35, every penny of that was being used for providing the services to me as a pigeon fancier that I need, but also securing the future of the sport, rather than using a significant amount to maintain an archaic, outdated system which doesn't represent me or 98% of the pigeon fanciers. But coming on to your question about the proposal, you put the link up. Basically, it's all people need to do is download the link. Obviously, read the front page. They don't need to read the other 44 pages if they don't want to. If they want something to send them to sleep at night, read the other 44 pages. But ultimately, they just need to read the front page. And if they're in agreement with it, and only if they're in agreement with it, take it to their club and ask it to be placed on the agenda with the hope of getting the club to support it and then send it into the region. That's the very first step that needs to happen. It needs to get on the agenda at least one region to have a chance of getting put forward to the RPRA AGM.
I mean, you're not saying this is the only thing. This is your, I would say, well-advised opinions with help from others that have put this extensive document, must have took hours and hours to do. You're not in any way saying this is the only way forward, but you're taking action to at least put it in. You're not discounting other ideas that can make
No.
change, but this is a practical thing. Somebody literally can go and download it, edit it within 10 minutes and put it in without having to do any more work. And that's a powerful
Yeah.
thing.
That's what we've tried to aim to achieve, really, Mark, is that because if you tell someone, well, if you want change, do something about it, go and rewrite the rule book and send it in. Most people are not going to have the time. Most people are not going to be motivated enough to do it. And most people will not know how to do it, quite frankly.
No,
do you know what I mean? Because they've never been involved in it. So we thought, what the thought was, have a document where we take all that out of people's hands. They just need to print it off, take it to the club, and make it as easy as possible for people if they want to change things.
Which is well done to you and everybody that's helped you with it for doing it. Two more things before we wrap this up, if possible. One particular bugbear of mine, which I alluded to earlier, is as of next year, I won't be a club member. So at the moment, there is no way for me to action this on my own in any way, shape, or form. I cannot go and put this to the RPRA myself as an individual saying I would like to propose this change. I have a real issue with that. I don't know what the numbers are of individual members that are not affiliated to a club. I've got no idea of knowing, but I would imagine it's a good 5%, if not more, of people. Guessing.
Yeah.
So myself and all the other people have essentially no say as an RPRA member in anything that they wish to have an input into. And I don't see how that can be right.
It's wrong. It's wrong. And somebody asked that question recently direct to the RPRA and said, how can I as an individual member engage? And the answer that came back, so I'm told, this is only what I'm told, is join a club. Well, that's not the right attitude, is it?
No, not at all.
But you're spot on. It's wrong, isn't it? You were £35, and your membership of an organisation should not mean any less than anybody else. And at the moment, those people who are individual members have no voice whatsoever.
No, it isn't right at all. It's and again, the changes, the proposals of one member, one vote would change all of that. So before my last question, I'm sure many other people, I know you've heard positives from good people. Thank you for putting on the hours and hours this morning. It took time to do. But let me ask you one question to try and get the importance of this over. If this or something similar, like you said, this you're not saying this is the only thing and it has to happen, but if this and or radical change to the RPRA as it currently is, without more, hole filling and band-aid over situations, if this or something equally that somebody else has as radical but needs to happen doesn't happen, as somebody that was in the trenches for a number of years, as somebody that is a pigeon flyer, that's generational pigeon flyer, what do you think is going to happen if this change doesn't happen?
It's a very good question, Mark, and I think the answer in short is we'll have the status quo. And what does the status quo mean? Well, the status quo means, in my opinion, the regions and the current structure effectively constantly blocking change, whatever that change is. And I'll give you one example of what kind of impact that has, really, because probably 3 years ago, this is something I mentioned in the video with Dan that you alluded to earlier. We have a situation currently where the level of the subscription, so the amount you pay to the RPRA, set in stone in the rule book. So every year it says every member will pay X amount. A portion of that will go to regions, and the rest goes to the running of the RPRA. So you're basically a large proportion of your income, because obviously the RPRA gets income from other sources like ring sales, etc. But the biggest part of your income comes from subscriptions. And basically, the association's ability to generate more income if they need to cover the rise in overheads, which, in this day and age, we all know that overheads in terms of electricity, everything is rising, is basically they've tied your hands behind your back. So I think it was 3 years ago, it was definitely just before I left. This was something I raised at council, and there was some discussions over it. And the feeling was, yeah, that's fine, but you got to get the rule change, because if you vote through an increase in subs, which doesn't happen very often, but if you vote through an increase in subs this year at this year's AGM, it doesn't come into effect till following November. So you're already lost 9 months before that increase comes in, which you can't run a business like that. So the proposition was through my club to the Welsh region was to basically scrap the fact that they mention what the value is you pay, and says that the council will set the subscription annually based on a budget. So they'll come up with a budget for next year from when the financial year starts the 1st of November, today actually, from the RPRA's point of view. And for the previous, for say October's meeting, they'll set the budget, and therefore that budget basis and the number of members they forecast for next year will help set the kind of subscription level, how much money they need to generate from subscriptions. That was voted against. I think the voting was something like 75% against. So basically, and I said in my annual review before the vote took place, was if anybody votes against this proposition, they're basically voting for the RPRA to make a significant loss next year. But they still voted against it. So here's the weakness in the situation, in the position where you have regions who are effectively making the decision for the wrong reasons, because again, it comes back to the shop steward mentality, where they see the HQ as the management and them as the kind of, they're going to hold them to account, when actually it's them making all the decisions. And so that's a major weakness in the position. So they've managed to keep the RPRA afloat and keep it liquid, from the point of view that they brought in the levy last year under an emergency rule. This year, they brought in a rise in subscriptions under an emergency rule 142. It shouldn't come to that. It should be properly planned out, shouldn't it? And the situation is that if we remain with the status quo, this position is never going to improve for the long term. These are all short-term solutions. They're not long-term solutions what's been implemented. Well done for them for keeping the RPRA afloat from one point of view, but it's done wrong. It's not done in a planned and coordinated and managed point of view. And by the way, that's not Chris Sutton's fault. That's the region's fault, or the people who attend the regions.
Which is the inherent issue we've been talking about. But there also comes a tipping point with any organization or business that's worrying as well, I think. If membership keeps declining, and unfortunately at the minute that's what's been happening, there does come a tipping point of income members that at some point things as they are cannot be viable. I don't know what that tipping point would be, but I would guess if you get towards the 10,000 member mark, the numbers just don't add up as it currently is.
No. And again, it comes back to the situation where you constantly need to be revisiting your overheads, and you need to be reducing those overheads in line with the reduction in membership and income, rather than asking people to pay more and more and more for implementing the same old time after time after time. And I just fear that the current governance structure, the regions and the council, are not going to be able to do that. I mean, the proof is in the pudding, really. You just look back at the last few years. It just proves it doesn't help manage that position and that situation, which is coming to fruition. Well, it's already happened, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So it's a huge risk to the association, and I really feel that the membership generally, I mean, you see lots of comments about people saying, oh, well, let's get rid of the RPRA and start a new organization. That's not the right way to go about it. The RPRA does a lot of good things. I still maintain that, and we need a strong functioning RPRA that's fit for purpose for the current day, and currently it's not.
I mean, again, I'm glad to see that you've stuck your head above the parapet. You've worked to get this out and you've done it. But I didn't personally expect to see you doing that again. But is it true to say this is probably your last ditched attempt to try and help with something? Because
Yeah,
again, I know from what I've tried in the past on a small scale, nothing compared to yourself. When you try and even express the idea of some changes, I've found myself to a degree giving up, to be honest, just do my own thing and what have you. But for you, you've put a lot of work into this, but at some point, I would imagine even you think, what else can I do?
yeah. I mean, this has to be the last attempt, really, doesn't it? Because if if what's happened over the last 12 months isn't enough motivation for people to get off their backsides and go along and vote through change, whatever that change is, whether it's this proposal or something else, then in my opinion, it's never going to happen. And unless we get this change through, again, in my opinion, it's just going to accelerate the demise of the pigeon sport in this country.
I think that's quite a powerful ending sentence to finish this on.
Yeah.
Thanks for your time. I will get this out with the view of as many people seeing it and the document as possible. But thank you again for your time, Ian. It's always a pleasure.
Cheers, Mark.
And thanks on behalf of everybody for all the time you put into getting this done.
No problem. Thanks very much.
No worries.